Hello, my fellow unicorns. Today I'm going to finish reading more scary stories to tell in the dark. I'm going to pick up where we left off at our last reading. This story, let's not get too close to the fire. This story is called The Bed by the Window. 3 old men shared a room at the nursing home. Their room only had one window, but for them it was the only link to the real world. Ted Conklin, who had been there the longest, had the bed next to the window. When Ted died, the man in the next bed, George Best, took his place, and the third man, Richard Green, took George's bed. Despite his illness, George was a cheerful man who spent his days describing the sights he could see from his bed. Pretty girls, a policeman on horseback, a traffic jam, a pizza parlor, a fire station, and other scenes of life outside. Richard loved to listen to George, but the more George talked about life outside, the more Richard wanted to see it for himself. Yet he knew that only when George died he would have his chance. He wanted to look out that window so badly that one day he decided to kill George. He is going to die soon anyway, he's told himself. What a difference it would make. George had a bad heart. If he had an attack during the night and a nurse could not get to him right away, he had pills he could take. He kept them in a bottle on top of the cabinet between his bed and Richard's. All Richard had to do was knock the bottle to the floor where George could not reach it. A few nights later, George died just as Richard had planned he would. And the next morning, Richard was moved to the bed by the window. Now he would see for himself all the things outside that George had described. After the nurses had left, Richard turned to the window and looked out. All he could see was a blank brick wall. Dead man's hand. Students at the school for nurses got along quite well with one another, except for Alice. The trouble with Alice was that she was perfect. At least, that is how it seemed to the other students. She was always friendly and always cheerful. Nothing ever upset her. Her school assignments were always on time and always perfect. She didn't even bite her fingernails. Many of the student nurses resented Alice. They would have liked to see her fail at something, become frightened or cry or do something that showed she had weaknesses like they did. One night, several students tried to frighten Alice with a practical joke. They borrowed the hand of a corpse they had been studying in anatomy and tied it to the light cord in her closet. When she tried to turn on the light, she would find herself holding a dead man's hand. That would scare anybody, one of them said. If it doesn't scare her, nothing will. After tying the hand in place, they went to the movies. When they got back, Alice was asleep. But when they didn't see her the next morning, they decided to find out what happened. There was no sign of Alice in her room, but they soon found her. She was sitting in the floor in her closet, staring at the dead man's hand and mumbling to herself. Alice didn't even look up. The joke had worked, but nobody was laughing. A Ghost in the Mirror. This is a scary game that young people play sometimes, trying to conjure up a ghost in their bathroom mirror. Many don't really believe that a ghost is going to appear, but they try to race one anyway for the fun and the excitement. Some are willing to settle for any ghost, but others have a particular ghost in mind. One of these is a ghost named Mary Worth, who is known as Mary Jane and Bloody Mary. She is the heroine of an old comic strip, but some say she actually was a witch who was hanged at the infamous witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Another one of these ghosts is La Llorona, the weeping woman who wanders the streets of cities and towns from Texas to California and throughout Mexico looking for her lost child. Still, another is Mary Wales, a young woman who is supposed to have been killed in a car accident in Indianapolis, Indiana about 1965. Her ghost is one of the vanishing hitchhikers. It is said that again and again she thumbs a ride home in a passing car, then vanishes before she gets there. Here's how ghost hunters try to raise a ghost. 1. They find a quiet bathroom, close the door, and turn off the lights. 2. While they stare at their face in the mirror, they repeat the ghost's name, usually 47 times or 100 times. If any ghost will do, they say any ghost in place of a name. If they do manage to raise one, the face will slowly replace their own face in the mirror. Some say a ghost is likely to be angry at being disturbed. If it gets angry enough, they say, it will try to shatter the mirror and come right into the bathroom. But a player can always turn on the lights and send the ghost back to where it came from. And when that happens, the game is over. The Curse. My dad's friend Charlie Potter was a small, nervous man who was always looking around as if he was in some kind of danger. After he told me the story about his college fraternity, I understood why. The frat doesn't exist anymore, he said. It was banned years ago. We had just 9 members at that point, and we're taking in 2 more, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. One night in January, just about this time of year, the 9 of us took them out to the country for their initiation. We took them to an old deserted house where 2 young men about our age had been murdered recently. Their murderer was still at large. We gave Jack a lighted candle and told him to go up to the 3rd floor. Stay there for an hour, we told him, then come back. Don't speak. Don't make any noise. If your candle goes out, carry on in the dark. From where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, then to the 3rd. But when he got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. We guessed that he had come to a drafty corner and the wind blew it out. But when the hour went by and he didn't come down, we weren't so sure. We waited another 15 minutes and got more and more nervous. So we sent Ernie Kramer up after him. When Ernie got to the 3rd floor, his candle also went out. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but there was no sign of either of them. Come on down, we called, but they didn't answer. Finally, we decided to go and get them. Armed with flashlights, we started up the stairs. It was quiet and dark as a grave in that house. When we got to the 2nd floor, we called out again, but there was no answer. When we got to the 3rd floor, we walked into a great big open space like an attic. Jack and Ernie weren't there, but we saw footprints in the dust. These led to a room on the other side of the attic. That room was also empty, but there was fresh blood on the floor, and the window was wide open. It was about 25 feet to the ground, but there was no ladder or rope in sight that they could have used to get down. We searched the rest of the house and the land around the house and found nothing. We decided that they were playing a trick on us. We figured that in some way they had escaped through the window and were hiding in the woods. The blood on the floor was to throw us off the track. We guessed that they'd show up the next day with a lot of stories and a lot of laughs. But they didn't. The next day, we told the Dean of Men what had happened, and he reported it to the police. The police didn't find anything either, and after several weeks, the search ended. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. There isn't much more to tell, he said. We weren't arrested, but the college disbanded the fraternity and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year. The strangest part came after we graduated. Someone must have placed a curse on us. Every year since then, around the time of that initiation, one of us has died or gone crazy. I'm the only one left, he said, and I'm in pretty good health. But there are times when I just feel a little peculiar. And then it says to rush at someone in the audience and scream, "Ah!" This last chapter is called The Last Laugh. These stories are scary and funny. This one is called The Church. There was a fellow named Larry Berger who wasn't afraid of anybody alive, but anybody who was dead scared the wits out of him. One night, Larry was driving out into the country in his old Jeep when he got caught in a bad thunderstorm. The rain was coming down in sheets. Since Larry's Jeep didn't have a top to it, Larry started looking for a place to take shelter. But at the first place he came to, he didn't even slow down. It was an old deserted cabin, probably as dry as a bone inside, but Larry knew for a fact that it was haunted, and he wasn't going to stay there. A few miles later, he came to an old abandoned church standing all alone in a field. It hadn't been used in years. All the window glass was gone, but it still had sections of the roof intact. So Larry parked his Jeep and ran inside. It was as dark as could be in there. Larry groped around until he found a pew and sat down. It was nice and dry, just as he thought it would be, and he stretched out his legs and he made himself comfortable. Suddenly, there was a big flash of lightning, and Larry saw that he wasn't the only one in that church. There were people sitting in almost every pew. They all had their heads bowed as if they were praying, and they were all dressed in white. These must be ghosts sitting in their shrouds, Larry thought. They must have come in from some graveyard to get dry. Larry jumped up and ran down the aisle as fast as he could, right smack into one of the ghosts. And the ghost, he went, bah! This one is called The Bad News. Leon and Todd loved baseball. When they were young, they had played on the town's baseball team. Leon had been the pitcher, and Todd played second base. Now that they were a lot older, they spent their free time watching baseball games on TV and talking about baseball. Do you think they play baseball in heaven? Leon asked Todd one day. That's a good question, said Todd. The one who gets there first should let the other one know somehow. As it turned out, Todd got to heaven first, and Leon waited patiently to hear from him. One day, Leon found Todd sitting in the living room, waiting for him. Leon was very excited to see him. What is it like up there? He asked. And what about baseball? When it comes to baseball, said Todd, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is we do play baseball in heaven. We have some fine teams. I play second base on my team just like I used to in the old days. That's the good news. What's the bad news? Asked Leon. The bad news, said Tom, is that you are scheduled to pitch tomorrow. So he's gonna pass away tomorrow. Oops. This next one is called Cemetery Soup. On her way home from the market, a woman took a shortcut through the cemetery. There, sticking up out of the ground, she saw a big bone. She picked it up and looked it over carefully. This will make a very good soup bone, she said. I think I'll take it home. It's perfect weather for hot soup. When she got home, the first thing she did was start the soup. Into the big soup pot went water, carrots, green beans, corn, barley, onions, potatoes, a snitch of beef, some salt and pepper, and the bone. She brought it all to a boil and then brought it down to a simmer. Yum, she said, sniffing it and tasting it. I can hardly wait till supper. Suddenly, she heard a small voice. Please give me back my bone. The woman paid no attention. Soon she heard the voice again. May I have back my bone, please? The woman was reading the newspaper, and again she didn't take any notice. In a little while the voice spoke up once more. It was beginning to sound angry. Give me back my bone. The woman kept on reading the paper. Some people are too impatient, she muttered. Once more the voice spoke. Now it sounded very angry, and it was so loud that the whole house shook. I want my bone back. The woman reached into the pot, grabbed the bone, and threw it out the window. In a voice just as loud, she shouted, Take it. There was an eerie silence. Then the woman heard footsteps scurrying away from the house down the road toward the cemetery, and she got up and served herself some soup. The brown suit. A woman came to the funeral parlor to see her husband's corpse. You did a good job, she said to the undertaker. He looks just the way he always looked, except for one thing. My husband always wore a brown suit, but you have dressed him in a blue suit. That is no problem, said the undertaker. We can easily change it. When she returned later, her husband was wearing a brown suit. Now he looks just the way he always did, she said. I know you went to a lot of trouble. It was no trouble, he said. As it happened, there is a man here who is wearing a brown suit, and his widow felt that blue would be better. He's about your husband's size, so he gave him the blue one and gave your husband the brown one. Even so, she said, changing all that clothing was a big job. Not really, said the undertaker. All we did was exchange their heads. So this is a song called Baroom. Goes like this. O'Leary is dead and O'Reilly didn't know it. O'Reilly is dead and O'Leary didn't know it. They both are dead in the very same bed, and neither one knows that the other one's dead. Baroom, baroom. This is the final story of the book. It is called Thumpity Thump. When we moved from Schenectady to Schoharie, we rented a house awful cheap because it was spooked and nobody would live in it. But we didn't care because we didn't take no stock in spooks. We had just gone to bed the first night, dog tired from riding in a wagon all day. We hadn't had time to shut our eyes when we heard a thumpity thump, coming down the attic stairs. I covered my head with the blankets, but I couldn't shut out the sound. Thumpity thump, it went. I could hear it plain as day. Past the bedroom door, thumpity thump, and down the stairs, thumpity thump, and through the kitchen, thumpity thump, and down the cellar stairs, thumpity thump, making the most awful racket you ever heard. It was more than we could stand, so we all followed the sound to see what was going on. When we got down the cellar stairs, we saw that it was a chair that had made all of that racket. There it was, with one of its legs pounding to a place on the dirt floor. We all just stood and gawped till my brother Ike said that he believed the chair was trying to tell us something about the place it was pointing at. There it was, with one of its legs pointing to a place on the dirt floor. We all just stood and gawped till my brother Ike said that he believed that the chair was trying to tell us something about the place it was pointing at. So Ike went down and got a shovel and started digging. He didn't have to dig far before his shovel struck something hard. Pretty soon we could see the edge of a box sticking out. We all hollered for him to hurry up and uncover the rest of it, and the chair got so excited it jumped up and down like it had gone plumb crazy. When Ike got the box uncovered, Pop and the boys pried off the lid, and there was the body of a man all smooched with blood. It was plain as nose on your face that he had been murdered, and the chair wanted folks to know it. Right then and there, we decided to leave. Being strangers, everyone would think that we had murdered him and come here to hide the body. It didn't take us long to fill up that hole and get out of that house. The chair was awful mad about our leaving, and it went up the cellar stairs. Thumpity thump, louder than when it got down. Then it thumpity thumped up the next set of stairs, and next louder still. When it got back into the attic, it thumpity thumped so loud we thought it would thump all the plaster and down our heads. Nobody asked us why we were moving out so soon, because nobody ever stayed more than one night in that place, and most not that long. But I can tell you, we were thankful to get back to Schoharie, where chairs stay where they were put and don't go raring and rampaging around, scaring folks out of their wits, pointing out murders and goodness knows what. And that is the end of more scary stories to tell in the dark. In my next video, I'm going to start with Scary Stories 3. So stay tuned. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a good night.